is exciting. Thanks everybody for joining us here. We're going to try to make this informative and hopefully everybody walks away with a little bit of something that they can use in their next career, their next opportunity, and maybe their day-to-day life. So, Mecca, let me ask you a couple of questions. So we had an opportunity to speak a little bit earlier, and I wanted to, one of the things that stood out to me was your career in terms of an entrepreneur and then your transition into the big tech. So if you wouldn't mind walk us through a little bit about your early part of your career and then how you arrived to where you are now.
Yeah, sure. So right out of college, I started working at a very small startup that wrote some of the original BlackBerry software, and I got hired there kind of almost by mistake. It was started by some classmates of mine a few years before, and I went to go have lunch with a friend of mine, and when I was in the office, everyone's pager started going off. Beep, 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 beep. They're like, oh, the service is down, the service is down. And he was like, we can't go to lunch right now. Everything's messed up. I got to fix this. And I was looking at his screen, and I was like, this looks like gibberish. What is it? He's like, that's Perl. I'm like, what's Perl? Oh, you're connecting to a database. ORM. Oh, don't use an ORM. Oh my gosh, it's fetching the whole table back and doing the filter on the client on like little BlackBerry pagers that had very small amount of memory. I'm like, you probably don't want to do that. You probably just want to, like, that's what SQL's for. It's what the database does. Do the query over there. Like, you would change this and this query and then run this, and then everyone's pager stopped. And I'm like, that's production? And it's like, who fixed it? Oh, the new guy. New guy? New guy. You're the new guy? And so I was like, no, I'm not the new guy. They're like, oh, you are now. And so then after graduation, I had some visa problems. I did the whole big consulting thing. I had an offer from Microsoft. Anderson Consulting was a big thing at the time, Ernst & Young, and all the rest of this, but I had visa problems, and sure, it would be able to fix those. So then the little startup was like, so I started working there. But the point I want to make with that is something that I want everyone in this room to take away from all the advice that I give. Take it with a grain of salt, because I'm older than I look. Don't let the cheeks fool you. 20 years ago was a very different situation than right now. It's harder right now. A lot of people my age are just mean, and they're like, oh, kids today, they don't do that. When we were starting out, rent was not this high. Student loans were not this high. Like, it's harder now. So I want you to, like, everything I say about my experience, I want you to kind of understand, does that still apply, right? What would you do today? Because sometimes it's very different. Last thing I'll say in this, I was talking to an MIT student the other day who was trying to get an internship interview for Google, and they had applied to 40 internships, and they had not even gotten a assessment. And I'm like, what do you mean assessment? They're like, you got to do an online assessment, and then when you pass that, you get to talk to a recruiter, and then if you pass the recruiter, then you get the actual interview. Then if you pass the interview, then you get the internship. So like, I'm not even getting to the online assessments. It's harder. So I want you to keep that in mind and put it in context. Oh wait, so you want me to? So that was the first job. You want me to talk about how I got to the?
Yeah, let's walk the plan.
So that startup, I ended up leaving that startup and starting my own startup that did more BlackBerry software, but it was something called, it sounds fancy, Department of Defense Public Key Infrastructure. That's a fancy way of saying, like credit cards have a little chip on them now? Picture a BlackBerry or an iPad with a sleeve, and imagine every government employee has a card with a chip on it, and if you want to read your email, you put the chip in the sleeve, and then just like everyone's got like Thought or VeriSign or Let's Encrypt, like, oh, we don't trust their certificate authority. We have our own in a server in the basement of the Pentagon. We want to use that one, right? So basically building the capability for BlackBerry users to do that. And the reason I picked that business is because it was a very well-known list of every agency in the world that was currently looking at sensitive but unclassified information with their BlackBerry, which they shouldn't be doing. But they're like, no solution exists which actually is in compliance. So we built it, and then we said, y'all should use our stuff. And then they said, oh, we kind of have to. And so we knew the total market size before we ever built the product. Did that, then started another company after that, sold that company, started another company that did mobile applications, did some of the first iPhone apps that did pretty well. Zagat, the restaurant review company, Zagat to Go for the iPhone, did that. Then I wrote a paper saying that the App Store wasn't very good, and that Google Market wasn't very good, and that Amazon should build an app store, because if they did, it would be better than either of those two, because it's a retail fundamentals business. Commerce is a trust business. I give you money, you give me stuff. If we like the way that works, we do that again and again and again. And it doesn't matter if it's digital or offline, trust for commerce is key. And someone from Amazon said, hey, big talker, right? Why don't you come through and build us an app store? And so I joined Amazon, built the Amazon App Store, built AWS Mobile Developer Services, and then left there to go to Google to work on the Google Play Store. And they were like, yeah, okay, make ours better too. And so that's basically, I just passed my 10-year Google anniversary, so I've been at Google for 10 years now. So I don't know if I still count as an entrepreneur. I don't think so.
That is pretty impressive. How about a round of applause for 10 years at Google?
I'm institutionalized. I can't be released now.
You know too much. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you did to lead up to your career. Specifically, it sounds like a lot of the opportunities that you were afforded came through people's not direct knowledge of your ability to perform. Can you talk a little bit about how you think that has affected your career and how you may market yourself in that same way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I talk a lot about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. Like a mentor can tell you, hey, here's a technique, here's how you might do this, here's how you would use React to do that, here's how you might think through building a observability system. Like, that's what a mentor can help you. A sponsor is someone who speaks for you when you're not in the room, right? Someone who is like, hey, there's some opportunity. Hey, how about Mecca, right? So that Department of Defense public key infrastructure thing that I was talking about, the company that built BlackBerry, Research in Motion, they should have built this for the US government. They should have. But they were like, man, this is going to take us like 8 or 12 engineers, and there's no BlackBerry in the entire country of Germany, and we could take those same 8 engineers and work with telcos in Germany and sell BlackBerry. We want to do that. The opportunity cost of doing this is too high for us. But you can't really say no to the US government. So Mecca will do it for you, right? And so that opportunity, right, that's something that they made available to us, right? Having folks know your capabilities before the opportunity becomes available is absolutely key. So one of the things that I hear folks say a lot right now, they're like, oh, no one's hiring. Promotion opportunities are limited at my company right now, like everything. So, what's the point even of networking? It's paradoxical, but like the best time to make these connections is when you're not looking for work. Because the time that someone's mind goes from, I don't have a role to fill, to I do have a role to fill, or there isn't a business opportunity, to, wow, there's a business opportunity here. At the time that shift happens, they already have a list of people that they're thinking of. And unfortunately, folks that look like most of the folks in this room are not present on that list. And so a key thing is to make sure that people think of you in that way before that opportunity comes. The other part of that is making sure that you are ready, your skills are ready for that opportunity when that moment comes. So yeah, that's something that I stress a lot.
And along that same vein, when we're thinking about that opportunity that's going to be happening in the future and those people that will be the purveyor of that opportunity, what is some advice you have about staying connected with such or said people where we know that it's going to happen? We know it's going to happen in about a year from now, 2 years from now, but how do I fill the gap so that I stay forward in their mind?
Yeah, so one of the things that I ask folks to do, well, there's two key pieces. One of them is if you send an email to someone who is a director at a tech company, a director at a startup or CTO or something, and hey, it's me, we met at Refactor, just following up, this, that, and the other, and they don't reply back to you, a lot of times folk think, oh, you're trying to big time me, you know what I mean? Or just like, oh, I guess I'm just not that important, and they let it go. Now, one of the things that happens is folks from marginalized communities don't have this sense of entitlement, like, you're gonna talk to me, right? And then send another one. But I'm saying that we all need to develop that a little bit. And I've talked about this before. If I go to a conference and I speak to a student who is from a majority background at a top tier university who does feel very entitled, they're like, oh, hey, Mecca, I met you at this thing, please, this, that, and the other. Hey, it's me again, I know Googlers are busy, we're just floating this to the top of your inbox. Hey, just following up. I'm gonna keep emailing till you tell me not, till you block me. I'm gonna keep doing it, this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. Hey, my cousin works at Google and he says that he gets 1,000 emails a day. You probably get even more, haha. Anyway, I ain't going away. And they keep doing that, right? So when you I think about things in terms of when you really want to achieve something, I think of perseverance as how many obstacles do I have to put in your way before you give up, right? I might say, oh, I got lifting goals, you know what I mean? I can do it. I can still do it. And then I want to get out of bed in the morning and it's cold. It looks like it's raining. I get back in bed and hit snooze, right? I didn't really want to go to the gym. On the other hand, if I get up, battery in my car is dead. You know what? I'm gonna take a lift. The machine is being used. I'm gonna use a different machine, right? How many steps, how many things have to be in my way for me to not achieve my goal? That's one way of describing perseverance. So, I've talked in the past a lot about the technical interview and how it doesn't map to the work that we do. I promise you, we could literally switch the technical interview with the MCAT. Take the LSAT, right? Because the thing that's really being tested is what is your ability to put applied effort over time and persevere through something. That's the reason that when you look at any tech company, and I'm not talking just about big tech companies, any company that is kind of doing like work at the top of their game, you'll see a lot of, athletes and Olympians and, people who came from enlisted to officers in the military. You see a lot of people, single parents who put themselves through college. What does any of that have to do with code? Nothing. What it has to do is that the same skill of that perseverance and pushing through helps you be successful. Now, the part where it gets tricky for most of the folks in this room do have that perseverance, but there is this sense of entitlement or lack of entitlement of, do I deserve this opportunity? Someone has verbally told me that they want to sponsor me. And now I've reached out to them and they haven't gotten back to me. Like, honestly, ask yourself, how many of you in this room would honestly feel comfortable sending another email, sending a third one, saying, unless I get an explicit no, I'm gonna keep emailing. It seems so pushy, right? But if you take only one thing away from this, especially in this environment right now, don't let the thing that stands between you getting the opportunity that you want and you not having that opportunity, be that you didn't send an email that someone was just overwhelmed and didn't reply to you and they totally would have sponsored you, but they let it slip. Don't let that be the reason that you don't get the opportunity.
Okay, along that same line or that same thought process, let me ask you a question. How often are you recruiting?
Interesting question. The way I look at it is I'm always recruiting.
That's the answer I was looking for. So
But-
what we see is that managers are often always recruiting, irrespective of having a position available, which ties
right.
into what you just said about that perseverance being top of mind.
That's absolutely right. I'm also always recruiting people who are already on my team. It's weird, but the way I think about it is I need to earn the retention of everyone who's on my team, right? I need to make it true that for what they're trying to achieve in their career, that this team is the best option for them to achieve that. Even if what they're eventually trying to achieve has nothing to do with my team, right? Sometimes people are like, okay, I'm a software engineer for you. I want to be a PM. You don't have any PM roles, but that's what I want, right? If my path is to be a PM, then I need to make it true that that path for them is better on my team than somewhere else. And if I can't make that true, I need to be real with it, and I need to help them get to a place where they have that next best opportunity, right? So I'm constantly thinking about recruiting, if by recruiting means I want to know where this network is. I already told, I talk smack on Twitter. Don't follow me on Twitter, it's terrible. My Twitter these days is just a lot of like pointing out like, and it's no fun anymore because I can't even point out Elon doing bad stuff because he just does it himself. He just like, he's like, blowing himself up. But like, one of the things that I said is I'm like, okay, a lot of people out there, a lot of startup CEOs are verbally letting people know that they hate their own employees. They don't even like their own employees. Yeah, this is cute in 2023. In 2024, everyone's going to start hiring again. People are going to remember that. How you treated people in 2023, how you talked about your own employees in 2023. And at the end of the day, all of us in tech are in the business of turning really talented individuals' time into products that customers love. That's the only business. We're all in that same business. Turning talented individuals' time and effort and creativity into products that customers love. If you don't have the talented individuals, you ain't creating those products. So we should always have this mindset. And I'm not unique in this viewpoint. I just say it out loud a lot more than some other folks. But this is the type of teams that you would want to wind up on. This is how managers are thinking about talent.
And that's a great segue onto when you're thinking about developing people and making sure they're in the right position. What qualities do you have? So let's say that I'm already, so we talked a little bit about how I could get or maybe network my way to another position, but now I'm thinking, okay, let's say that I'm in the position of, I've transitioned from individual contributor to manager, and now I want to move up and forward. What are some of the milestones you think at the levels when you're thinking about leading smaller teams to larger teams?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, different companies think about it a different way and different organizations think about it a different way, but I've thought about this the same way from my startups through Amazon, through Google. The way that I think about things is, you approach different levels of scale, and some of the things that worked at smaller scales don't work at larger scales. So I don't know if anyone here has ridden a motorcycle? You shouldn't, it's terrible, it's very dangerous, right? Does anyone know about counter steering on a motorcycle? Yeah. So it's a weird thing. When you're going at a low speed on a motorcycle, to go right, you turn right. To go left, you turn left. But when you're going at high speeds, you can't even turn the wheel. You have to lean. But the weirdest thing is the bike wants to stay upright. You can't lean to the right. It just won't work. The best way to do it is if you think about, imagine you're going down the freeway at 60 miles an hour and the bike just flips to the side this way, you're gonna fall over this way, right? So to go right, you steer left, which makes you lean, which pulls the bike to the right. And you'll notice this Tour de France people, they get up above about 30, 35 miles an hour when they're downhill. You'll see them do it too. Before they turn right, you'll see them kind of do one of these motions. So some of the things that work at lower speeds don't work at higher speeds. Even something like code review. I'm a TL of a team of 3 people. The statement I want to be true is every piece of code that leaves my team or sub-team is as high quality as if I'd written it myself. Well, if I only have 3 people, I can solve that. I'm just going to review everyone's code. You write. I review. Okay, what happens when you're the TL of a team of 8 people? Well, I'm going to review everyone's code. Okay, what about 30 people? Well, I'm going to review everyone's code. I had an engineer who I told him that, I don't know if you're familiar with Google Levels, I told him he couldn't get from level 5 to level 6 until he solved this because he was at this point, I think he was number 2 or number 3 in terms of how much code he reviewed of every engineer at Google. He was doing, hundreds, it's like 500 or 600 CLs a month, reviewing everyone's code. I'm like, oh, I'm Superman. No, you're not. You haven't learned this skill, right? So how do you do? You got to go to sampling, right? You have to have delegate TLs, right? You have to set up some process, like a weekly process where you review some CLs, you spot check, right? So there's different types of things that you put in place so that you can keep that statement true. Every piece of code that leaves our team, whether it's written by the intern or written by an engineer who's the same level as me, is as high quality as if I had written it myself, but without having to review every piece of code myself. So that's one example of something. As a manager, even something like communications, how do you know if there's a problem on your team? Well, I have one-on-ones with everyone. I talk to every single person on my team. Okay, cool. How big's your team? 7 people. Okay, what happens when your team is 20 people? What happens when it's 50? What happens when it's 100? You can't have 100 people and have one-on-ones every week with every single person on your team, right? And it's not like you can, I'm a 10x engineer, I do my one-on-ones in 3 minutes, right? Like it doesn't work that way, right? You need to come up with different mechanisms, even how you communicate, right? I tend to be a verbal communicator, right? I like to talk to people one-on-one, right? What happens when I'm running an org of 500 people? How do I communicate what's important to my team? I can't do that with verbal, right? Written communication. But what's the format? Do I send a newsletter? Do I send an email? Do I write blog posts? Do I tweet? Right? So these are all skills that you have to learn as you go through these different, different team sizes, right? Then there's also, going back to an engineering example, when you're dealing with junior engineers, sometimes they write code that is correct, sometimes they write code that is incorrect. So your feedback is make sure the code is correct. That's what you're trying to do. Pretty quickly, once you get to senior engineers, all the code is correct. It's all correct. Now it's all about trade-offs, right? This design is better if this is what you're solving for. This design is better if this is what you're solving for, right? Oh, we're right. Our director is bigger than your director, right? Okay, but as you get more senior, you start figuring out, okay, why do they think that? Why do they choose this set of trade-offs? The other thing, too, is if you have certain personality types that you can't get along with, oh, I just don't like this personality type. If you're a very junior engineer, it's easy. They just move you to a place where you don't have to work with that personality type. But if you think about it, as you get more senior, the number of people that you interact with increases exponentially. The probability that at least one of those people will be the exact personality type that you don't like to work with approaches 100%. So you need to learn the skill of how do I achieve success on a project even if I'm working with someone whose personality is the opposite of what I like to work with, right? It becomes something that becomes career limiting if it's like, oh, Mecca doesn't like these types of people, so we can only put him in these types of things. And so I'm very intentional with all the folks in my organization about where they are on this development curve and also where they want to get to. Do you ever want to lead a team of 80 people? You don't have to do that. You can get to a principal engineer and only work with 4 or 5 people? Is that a skill that you want to acquire? Forget what the org needs. Is that what you want to do? And if it is, then we put you on that path. If it's not, we move you into a different direction. But I'm very intentional about what are the specific competencies that we want folks to learn, and how do we decompose that into intentional practices, and then how do we prove to ourselves that we've really accomplished these skills, that we really have those skills. And that's sort of how we move folks up the progression.
Okay. That's a very well thought out method in which you go about influencing and coaching your people. Something came to me while you were speaking about that, and it kind of ties in all of the stuff that we've been talking about with the network, and it brings together with the coaching of people. Have you ever been in a meeting, large meeting? You're there, you're multitasking, you're not there necessarily leading the meeting, but it's Tuesday, you're in the meeting, and you hear a familiar voice, someone in your vertical say something along the lines of, "That's because you're an arrogant bastard." And immediately you see the rest of your week just go away. Everything you had planned, every word, arrogant, that was Wednesday. Bastard, that's Thursday and Friday. What do you, and I bring that forward to say that, so one, how do you manage like that political landscape, how to help people? And then also, typically, that is when we see people, or we hear or start to network and hear stories around people. Did you hear what was said in this meeting, which may have been something to the detriment of their career? And how do we reframe those things so that we're making sure that we're also highlighting some of the things that help people become aware of the positive things, contributions that I'm then bringing to the organization? And so typically we hear things in the negative because gossip travels the speed of light. But how do we then leverage, have you had to deal with anything like that? And then how could we turn that frame around where we're advocating and being an evangelist for our people such that they are being highlighted for the good work that they do?
Yeah, and so to answer the first part of your question, not those exact words, but yeah, that is something that I've dealt with, that has been said about me, and that has been said about people on my team. And just specifically, it is, you think this about yourself, right? You think highly of yourself. And that is something that I encourage everyone in this room to kind of get over. One of the things that I do as someone from a marginalized background is I don't work on anything that doesn't have a clear metric around it that can be used to determine success. So I think about the tech industry as sort of like the hype side and the free cash flow side. The free cash flow side pays the bills, right? That's what shows up on the earnings report. That's what shows up on metrics that people care about. So you can talk about numbers of users, you can talk about revenue, you can talk about margin, you can talk about all these things. I intentionally don't work on anything here because the opportunity to shed credit away from Black folk in tech is so high. So the other thing that I do is I intentionally talk my mess, right? Because a lot of times, well, he just focuses on inclusion and, this, that, and the other, everything. And so I like saying things like, oh, wait, hold on a second. How did Google revenue do? It grew. Okay. How much of that revenue was Play? This much. Okay, cool. How much of Play revenue was this team that's 50% women? This much. Okay. Let's look at the specific projects and let's see, okay, male TL, woman, man, woman, man, woman, man. About half of that was driven by women engineers. Yeah. My team is better than your team. Better. Like, I'm not mincing words. My team is better than your team. And I'll tell you why. You are structurally at a disadvantage because I can recruit majority engineers. I can recruit Asian men, Asian white men. I don't lose any ability to recruit majority engineers. But I can also recruit underrepresented engineers, right? So if this was your team, you could take a look at that impact and you could subtract out all the marginalized engineers, and that's about what you're, actually, matter of fact, didn't your team run this before I took it over? Let's look at and then there's me, and then, okay, and whoop, oh, there it is, right? So I'm not advising everyone to do this again, like these potentially career limiting moves, but I talk my mess because I don't like the conversation about inclusion being a trade-off, right? So some of y'all know I moved half of my org to Atlanta. The specific hypothesis with moving to Atlanta was we believed that we could recruit not as good a Google engineer or maybe not quite as good because inclusion, lower the bar, blah, blah, blah. We believe that we can recruit a higher caliber of engineer in Atlanta than we can in Mountain View. Why? Because a lot of folks in Mountain View are like looking at house prices and like, this ain't the move, right? We can still recruit the majority engineers, but Georgia Tech graduates more women than any other school in the nation. HBCUs offer declines people who applied to Google, got accepted, and said, I ain't going to the mission. I live on Peach Street, right? I got 5 bedrooms, it's not happening, right? And we believe that we could get some of those folks to accept the Google offer who previously had not said it before, right? So I talk my mess, and then I say, oh, let's take a look at Atlanta. Let's take a look at how it's doing. And, I can't reveal any numbers, like the tranquilizer dart from Ruth will hit me, but it's doing its thing, right? So I talk that mess. And when people try to say things about folks on my team from marginalized backgrounds or majority backgrounds, I use the data to sort of counter that narrative. I'll let you there in a second. But I talk about perception bombs, right? A perception bomb is something that someone lobs at you, an accusation that is ephemeral, that then you waste a lot of time defending against, right? And so one way I avoid those perception bombs is by keeping things metrics driven and keeping the team focused on things that are high priority for the company and that have a clear metric around them so that folks can see the impact. Yeah, sorry. Thank you.
Awesome. So if we're looking at what you just walked through, I've heard a couple of things. I heard that finding that position before you need it. I heard of marketing yourself, and I heard of having good skills. If you will bring that all into final points and you wanted to share with the crowd, how would you bring that home for us?
Yeah, the final point that I would sort of like to tie all these things together is to think about whatever you're trying to get to for your next role in your careers, right? I know that right now there's a lot of talk about no one's hiring, there's layoffs, there's promotions are slower, all this different type of stuff. I want folks to think about it in terms of there is some opportunity that is going to present itself to you in the middle of next year. And that is the next step in your career. And your job between now and then is to grow into this future version of yourself. For each of you, there's a version of yourself that is, they're just a little bit better than you. Problems that you would struggle with today, they would just cut through like they're not even there. What does that version of you know that the today version of you does not know, right? It's figuring out what those skills are and making sure that you grow those skills so that when the opportunity presents itself, you're ready to take it. And then the second thing is thinking about who might have that opportunity. Not who has it today, because today things are, pretty tight. But think about who might have that opportunity in the future, right? If there's some startup that you're thinking of working with and that startup is not hiring right now, it doesn't matter, right? Leadership folks from that startup might be at this conference. They might be in this room today, right? Make that connection today and just keep them up to date with what you're working on and what you want to do over the next couple of months, couple of quarters here. So when that moment comes, you are both ready and you hear about the opportunity, right? Draft day comes, you want to be near the phone, right? Don't be away from the phone. And draft day comes, you want to You want to be in shape. Don't hit snooze and pull the blankets over yourself, tempting as it might be. So that's what I would ask folks to take away.
Awesome. Thank you, Mecca. I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Can we get a round of applause for Mecca?